But my name is Mac Gardner, and I'm a retired doctor, and I've given very serious consideration to standing as a candidate in the upcoming election as an independent in this Taieri electorate. The last election, when it was called Dunedin South, this was the electorate that I lived in. Although with boundary changes for this electorate, I'm now just over the fence in the new Dunedin electorate. For the record, I've lived in Dunedin for most of my adult life, and I have a great affection for the city. Thinking of standing for Parliament, hoping to be your MP, wasn't a decision I made lightly, and a part of me was still a bit reluctant, or at least a bit nervous. I'm not a natural politician. I'm in my 80s. I'm actually the same age as Joe Biden. Not in perfect health, although not too bad. And I'm more normally a private person, and my main occupation these days should really be with parental duties. But there are things going on down here that are very unsatisfactory, and I felt I had to do something. I've been building up quite a head of steam over the past several months, and it's time to put that steam to use, to put it, as much as I'm able, to good effect on behalf of my community, if indeed my community would think that I could have what it would take. So that's why I'm here this evening, to show you who I am. What you see is what you get. And then to judge if there's sufficient support that I should actually proceed with my claim. Okay, well, let's see how we go. Okay, there's three things that I'm worried about in particular. For the moment, just three. I'll focus on what I know about, what I can speak about with a decent amount of knowledge and understanding, and I'll stick to my editing. Other things may pop up down the track, and I'll try to keep an open mind. But it's the big three that have led me to be here today seeking your support. And I'll stay here for as long as I need to afterwards this evening if anyone has a question or criticism or advice to put to me when I've given my spiel. Well, the big three, here's what they are. The new hospital, electrified suburban rail from Mosgiel to Dunedin, and assisted dying to be available in advanced dementia. That's what I'm on about. Righto then, let me look at each of these in detail. First, the new hospital. You're all probably aware, very well aware, of what's been happening in recent times, with instruction from the Health Department in Wellington that the original plan for our hospital is too generous and it needs to be downgraded. And although it's been coming to a head more recently, it's actually been a bit of a slow burn over the last some years. Back in about 2018, the floor space in the new hospital was going to be about 96,000 square metres. The bed number was 454. There would be 3 new MRI and 3 new CT scanners and a PET scanner. I'll explain about these scanners in a wee bit. And there was to be a staff facility called the Pavilion Building, as a place where doctors and nurses could maintain effective communication. And a staff bridge and a bridge for the public between the two main buildings, the inpatient building and the outpatient buildings. And you may well have driven past the old Cadbury site on Highway 1 in the central city, and you'll know where these buildings are going to be. Then the floor space got reduced, and bed numbers were cut down to 398. Further, some wards and facilities were to be left empty, and the fancy word for this is a shell. One of these days, these shells might get filled, but who knows when, or indeed, who knows if. So much cutting back's already been done, can we really trust that these empty spaces will one day get called back into action, that these shelves will get filled? Or will we continue to have a Swiss cheese of a hospital, holes all through it? And all these cuts will require yet more planning, more rejigging, and so the opening date gets pushed out to 2029. Worse was to come. As a Christmas present, last December, yet more square metres were deleted, and the PET scanner and an MRI and one of the MRI scanners taken away, with only empty shells to show where they should have been. And savage cuts to the space for laboratories where the scientists test patient samples, and one of the bridges disappearing. A number of southern mayors were horrified at these cuts and likened, this was just recently in the paper, and likened the proposal to trying to make savings in a house build by removing the living room, passageway and the bathroom fit out. But then, just recently, hearing the groundswell of voices from Dunedin, the voice of the people, the marvellous campaign organised by the City Council and with great support from the Taieri Times, Following these campaigns, the department, Te Whare Ora, then came back with a reduction in the cuts of $10 million. Well, frankly, this was a damn squib. This is still well short of what we were promised in the so-called definitive business case back in 2021. $10 million is about 0.5% of the total cost, so it's really just a few crumbs they hope will keep us happy. Well, it won't. It doesn't cut the mustard. In the scheme of things, it's a very modest amount, and still leaving $80 million of cuts in place. This tiny reversal of a fraction of cuts was announced with some fanfare. You may know the expression, the elephant laboured and brought forth a mouse. And there was the implicit message that we should be grateful for small mercies, as Mayor Radish put it, that we should pay our forelocks to our masters in Wellington and accept what we've been given. Furthermore, as I mentioned, these cuts now need the planning to be rejigged, and so the date of opening has been set back by a year to 2029. In my view, this will not do. A hospital needs a decent amount of space and a good number of beds. Martin Fields, an ear, nose, throat surgeon at the hospital, has commented that no new hospital has ever opened with too much space. You might have read his piece in the ODT a few months back. He described himself as being in despair at the cuts. My wife was actually the nurse commissioning officer for our present hospital back in the 1980s, and she well knew that almost as soon as the hospital opened, there'd be offices created out of cupboards and always garden areas eliminated for new services and so on. This is bad for efficient functioning and detrimental to staff morale. And actually, it's rather likely that some of these empty spaces, the shells that they talk about in our new hospital, these spaces will become storage rooms for all sorts of stuff. Pete Hodgson, a former Labour Minister of Health and a local to boot, and a big wheel in the new hospital planning, has worked out some numbers to try and convince us that space hasn't been reduced. But frankly, this has been smoke and mirrors. Count the beds, Pete. Has he not been aware of the load on emergency departments around the country, where ambulances are getting rammed, as they call it, when there's no space in the hospital for their patients? And so they're actually using ambulances to provide extra bed space. We must have proper bed space, and the original figure of about 450 should apply. But Mr Hodgson, speaking for the Wellington Green Counters, wants to slash this to 398 beds. We must not accept the downsizing that has been imposed upon us by Green Counters in Wellington. Well, let's take a side trip into the matter of cancer. You probably know about the dire state of cancer services in our neck of the woods. According to criteria, we were either the second worst or the actual worst in the country in terms of waiting to be seen by a cancer specialist and getting treatment underway. There's this grim statistic that sounds like something out of Monty Python, that some people were getting appointments to see a cancer doctor beyond the date that they were expected to survive to if they didn't get new treatment. So can you imagine, by the time you turn up for your cancer appointment, you're already in a coffin? Two reasons in particular put forward for this terrible state of affairs is dysfunction among the hospital managers and an inability to recruit sufficient specialist staff. It's rather obvious. We must do better, a lot better, a great deal better. Let's join some dots here. Righto, if you'll allow me, I'd like to think of you all just for a couple of minutes as medical students. I'm pretty used to talking to medical students. I need to talk to you about scanners, CT, MRI, PET, PET, sure. These letters stand for somewhat technical names, but we needn't worry about too much. Computed tomography, magnetic resonance imaging, and positron emission tomography. And I need to talk to you about the latest way that scanners can have a huge role in treating cancer. More simply, we could call these scanners very fancy X-ray machines that can get a good look at what's going on in the body and what is going wrong in the body. There's a CT scanner and an MRI scanner at the present hospital, and they are critical in modern medical and surgical management. It's actually amazing pictures that you can see the detail of all these body parts. We will have CT and MRI scanners at the new hospital, and one of the MRI scanners, the new ones, has just been reinstated as part of the 10 million or so we've been granted, or should I say, given back. But this is the biggie. We're no longer going to have a PET scanner, only a shell space where, who knows when, at some distant future date, a PET scanner might actually happen. Well, why am I so fussed about a PET scanner? Well, firstly, this is what a state-of-the-art hospital should have, and the health department did originally promise us a state-of-the-art hospital. A promise is a promise. Andrew, Grant, Pete, Aisha, the coalition of the cutters. The particular thing about PET scanners is this: they are very clever. They don't look only at the structure of body parts, but they can see what's actually happening. This is mostly useful in particular for understanding cancer. Cancer tissue grows differently from normal tissues, and a PET scan can detect this difference, and we can see very precisely where a cancer is, and thus be in a better position to know how to treat it. PET scanners aren't new, they've been around all this century. Now, here's a fancy word. I hope I won't lose you, all your medical students out there. Theranostics. Theranostics. Okay. This is a new word combining therapy, that is treatment, and diagnostics, that is finding out what's wrong. Theranostics. So file that word away in your minds. This wonderful new way of treating cancer, theranostics, is based upon PET scanning, and then some very clever work by scientists behind the scene to make the treatments that can home in on the cancer once the PET scan has shown us where to go. And these treatments can kill the cancer, but leave other tissues alone. This treatment, theranostics, has been making a huge difference to cancer treatment in other countries, including just across the water in Australia. As I said, it's very clever. I've been in touch with a graduate of our medical school who has a stellar international reputation in medical scanning, who's lived mostly in the USA, and to quote what he said to me, I must admit that it never occurred to me that Dunedin did not have a PET scanner. They should have had one at least 10 years ago. Well, all right, better late than never. The new hospital was going to have New Zealand's first PET scanner in the public sector. Now, there are private PET scanner machines in Auckland, Hamilton, Wellington and Christchurch, and one soon coming to the private service in Dunedin. But ours was to be the first at a public hospital. Pete Hodgson, as I've already mentioned, former Labour Minister of Health and a local, has made the disappointing comment that, and I'm quoting, installing the public sector's first ever PET scanner in Dunedin rather than Auckland makes little sense. Well, this is the policy of the tyranny of the majority. The goodies go to where most people are, and smaller populations, such as we are left out in the cold. The poor cousin. Another important point. Having the best technology will be as attractive to doctors thinking of working here. We do want to have the best people staffing our new hospital. Wow, Dunedin has the latest PET scanner. I can look after my patients with theranostics. That sounds like a hospital I'd really like to work in. Some will say, and indeed some have, that deciding about our PET scanner needs to be done in the context of equity around the country. My response to that is, given the poor treatment, the subpar treatment we've already had so far in the southern south, we need to leapfrog to a better place. And if we are going to have the best public PET scanning facilities in the country, then so be it. We can offer a national service in the public sector. Treatment available for everyone, not just those who can afford to go into private, as you may have read about in the Otago Daily Times recently. 2 brothers with prostate cancer, one did well in private, the other in the public system did not. I'm a bit familiar with the idea of the best medical facilities, not necessarily being in the largest population centres, and I have some small experience here. I once spent some time in the state of Iowa in the central USA, the Midwest, at a smallish city, smaller than Dunedin, Iowa City, a university city rather like Dunedin. The big smoke in the state of Iowa is the state capital, Des Moines, but many of the major hospital facilities are actually at the University of Iowa in small town Iowa City. People are happy to go there from other parts of the state when they need super specialist treatment. So, if we could have theranostics here in Dunedin, giving the best possible cancer treatment, publicly funded, we would of course welcome people from around the country to take advantage. Every New Zealander would have equal access. Locals couldn't, huge jump. They'd only have the advantage of not needing to travel. One thing I'm aware of is how very effective PET scanning can be in the particular case of treating prostate cancer. It's a quantum leap from current surgery and radiotherapy. Doctors in Melbourne are world leaders across the water in treating prostate cancer using PET scanning. So my suggestion is that Health New Zealand, Te Whatu Ora, if they really want to do the right thing by cancer treatment in the southern south, To do something that would bolster their credibility down here, they could set up PET theranostics, fancy word again, PET theranostics down here in our new hospital, starting out on prostate cancer and available to patients throughout New Zealand. Perhaps we could get advice from colleagues across Melbourne. I used to work at the hospital system over there. Even so, the cancer department will have to stay in its present building, the orangey-brown building on Hanover Street, and patient and staff will need to trundle back and forth to the new hospital on shuttle buses. This is a frankly cockamamie plan, but we seem stuck with it for the time being. Although actually, a new cancer building is on the books, and it would be right beside the inpatient building of the new hospital down at the railway end, at the railway station end. But there's no current planning for this, and it seems unlikely on present progress to be in place before 2040. 2040? I'll be just about 100 by then. Okay, leaving cancer for the moment. Another thing is the learning space, which has the fancy name of Interprofessional Learning Centre. Of course, a hospital is more than the building. It's the people inside, the doctors, the nurses, the physios, the midwives, the lab staff, the occupational therapists, and so on. They all need to be trained, and just as importantly, they need to keep up with best practice for the rest of their careers. I'm fond of saying that someone who starts out as a medical student continues to be a medical student until the day they retire, or actually, for quite a few of us, even into retirement. And this is where the Interprofessional Learning Centre will have a huge role. In 2021, it was going to cost $51 million. Last year, it came in at $115 million, more than doubled. Pete Hodgson, to his credit, has been advocating for the importance of this centre, so thank you, Pete. We must have staff who are on their game, up to snuff, at the cutting edge of looking after patients. Now, all we need is for bean counters in Wellington to tick that box, which, as I understand very recently, thanks only to the local campaign, They Say We Pay, they actually have done that. Well, very good. The Interprofessional Learning Centre is to be maintained. Very good, but we need more chaps. David Clark, the former health minister, has been quoted as saying that the new hospital will be with no compromise to clinical services. That's his exact words. Now, he does indeed deserve kudos for having been at the forefront of getting the project up and running in the first place. So thank you for that, David. But can I say, not having a PET scanner is a compromise, a serious compromise to clinical service, especially to cancer services. So David, please, live up to your word, and if you still have influence. And another thing is the pathology labs, where they test blood samples and so on. We don't see them, so we hardly know where they are. But their work behind the scenes is crucial. And actually, they were the unsung heroes of the COVID response. It was a superhuman effort to get the virus testing up to speed in time to get the pandemic under control. Now get this, the laboratories of the new hospital have only 350 square metres of space, a huge drop by 1,000 square metres from the 1,300 originally planned. Of course, this would be completely impossible, except that, as I gather, the plan is to hive off most of the work to the for-profit private sector. This would be hugely undermining of morale and seems so counterintuitive as to how one should set up a leading state-of-the-art hospital. So here's what we need. The cuts must be reversed, completely reversed. We need 450 beds. We don't want to see ambulance ramping. And there must be no sharing, no empty rooms. Some of you may remember the TV ad from many years ago. An insurance company, an ancient Egyptian, was complaining to his company that when his pyramid fell over, they were only going to pay for half a pyramid. Half a pyramid? Do you remember how he said it? Well, that's what the government wants to give us. Half a hospital. Half a hospital? Well, okay. It's a bit better than a half, but it's not a whole hospital. And how to pay for it? Okay. It's a lot of money. If they really wanted to, government could find the money. They always can. But please spend wisely. A recent article on the list quoted Dr Shane Retty, not understanding why the Ministry of Health has 1,100 consultants and contractors at the head office, and Te Whatu Ora has 200 staff, 200 just for communications. Such profligacy in the bureaucracy, but such stinginess in the front line of health care. Some may argue that going back to the previous definitive business case, as it was called, will bring in further delay. Well, If we want the best, we may have to wait a bit. But anyway, bringing in the recent cuts has, as I understand, already put more delay in the system, pushing the hospital out to 2029. But I don't know. If we went back to the earlier design, no redesigning necessary, doing it as it was, would that shorten the time frame back to 2028, the original year? Or does even going back to a previous, fully sorted plan need yet more rejigging, causing more delay? I'm not a builder, I don't know. But actually, I have an answer, speaking as an amateur. There may be some here who remember the Wanganella, the ship moored in Deep Cove to house workers on the Manapori power scheme way back in the 1960s. It's true we'll need a large workforce when the new hospital is to be built, and some local accommodation might be pretty stretched to house all the workers. But if we had a smallish cruise ship tied up in the upper harbour and leased for the duration of the build, and if we could offer, say, 10-day stints and airfares provided, we could run double shifts and bring in workers from around the country. We might even be able to bring back the original 2028 date, or who knows, 2027. And now, here's this crucial requirement, so listen up. The hospital must be a complete going concern from the day it's opened. Not a Swiss cheese of a hospital full of empty shells, no missing floors, no missing scanners. It's interesting that in the midst of the government wanting to shave off $90 million, well, now cut it down to $80 million in the hospital spend, they've blithely announced that a new Auckland harbour crossing is planned, and it will cost somewhere between $15 billion and $25 billion. Billions floating around, whatever's needed to keep Auckland going, but $80 million is too much to give us a proper hospital. And do you know the new motorway out of Wellington, Transmission Gully? A very nice bit of road, 27 kilometres long, which was supposed to cost about $800 million. But then it cost way more than they thought, bumping up to 50% to $1.25 billion. And so the government said, yep, sure, you need another $400 million, fair enough, here you go. Now, if they had applied the same way that they've been doing it to our new hospital, they'd have said, sorry, you can't have all 27 kilometres, we'll give you, say, 24 kilometres, we'll shell the last 3 kilometres, and maybe we'll complete it one of these days. But no, they're up north, just out of Wellington, and they got what they wanted. And for heaven's sake, they evaporated $350,000 on an opening ceremony, a scandalous waste. Up there, they just need to shake the money tree, and they get as much as they want. Or the $200 million granted to the Christchurch Stadium, rather more generously, by the way, than to Dunedin, where we got about only $12 million for ours. They could save several millions by not having a roof, leave it as a shell. But I don't hear Grant Robertson clawing back that amount. It seems more important to him that football players in Canterbury keep dry and rainy weather, rather than we have a decent hospital. If government wants to find the money, they always can. A state-of-the-art hospital with no functioning PET scanner is not state-of-the-art. It's a pub with no beer. We need to stand up now. Once we've started, or once they've started on the build, it will be too late. Don't let them get away with it. We need to be treated equally. The Prime Minister has described the new Dunedin Hospital as incredibly important, his words. Well then, sir, act accordingly. Get your ministers into line. Do what has to be done. Give us the hospital we need. Okay, the next thing. Bringing back the Mosgiel to Dunedin suburban rail service. And my reason for starting the campaign here in Mosgiel was because of this interest. There was a train running from Mosgiel to Dunedin for the better part of a century, but it came to an end in the 1980s. By then, more people had cars, and it's true that a car can be more convenient going point to point, except when you're looking for a park close to the hospital. But things have changed now in the 2020s. A big question, an existential question, is the matter of climate change. Cyclone Gabrielle may have been telling us what we could be in for if we, and the rest of the world, don't take action. Young people are in despair. The former Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, declared climate change to be her generation's nuclear-free moment. That may be so, but not much action has been taken. It's ironic that we're burning more coal now, using imported coal, than we ever did, to keep the Huntley power station up there in the Waikato ticking over. Subsidising well-off people to buy electric cars has been a rather bizarre use of taxpayers' money. Not everyone can afford a new $80,000 Tesla EV, and those who can shouldn't have the rest of us to help them pay for it. Train travel is a way more democratic thing to push for. And returning trains to the Mosgiel line would be making a clearer, more dramatic statement that the government really is concerned about reducing the use of fossil fuel and really does want to convert to electricity and green electricity at that. We have a lot of that in the south, all those dams in the Otago and Southland hinterland, no coal-burning power stations down here. Everything is hydro, well, except a little bit of wind. I know we're only New Zealand and contribute the tiniest amount of global carbon dioxide, but making an example puts us in a better position to persuade the mega polluters. It will stand as a declaration of serious intent, and tiny bits add up. Michael Wood, the Minister for Auckland and Minister for Transport, has commented very recently on the need for decarbonisation in public transport. Well, okay, Michael, if you could manage it, turn your gaze away from Auckland for a moment and check us out down here. Actually, this should have been a job for the Greens, a rather obvious carbon-free project that they should have got going. But they seem basically a North Island parliamentary party. Almost all their MPs live up there. So a vote for the North Island Greens, from the point of view of us in the southern south, and us wanting to get our railway re-established, would be a wasted vote. But speaking of Wellington, there's a very good precedent up there. This is the suburban railway line to Johnsonville. Johnsonville is a suburb with a similar population base that Mosgiel has, and a similar distance from the city centre. Trains run regularly throughout the day, giving up other suburbs along the way, and the fares are single-digit dollar amounts. So that's what I'm promoting for Mosgiel, a service just as Wellingtonians have for Johnsonville, with stops along the way, as we used to have, and a couple also new ones: Wingatui, Grand Vista, Abbotsford, Green Island, Burnside, Concord, Alden Hill, Caversham, Kensington, Dunedin, and continuing on to the stadium. And of course, electrified. We could probably use the same train sets that they run to Johnsonville, although we need expert advice. Next time you're in Wellington, go to the station, check out platforms 1 and 2, which is where Johnsonville starts from, and have a look at the yard beyond. Very many train sets can be parked there. We won't need that many, maybe just 3 will do, 2 in daily service and 1 for backup. It's very good that Hillside, by the way, has been rejuvenated, and so they could look after these new electric train sets. And a nod here, by the way, to the local MPs who did advocate for Hillside, and I applaud Claire Curran and Ingrid Leary. And of course, Hillside sits in the Taieri electorate. Well done, ladies, and thank you. It's good to see the new building going up at the moment on Hillside Road. It would cost a bit bringing back a train service, but way short of the vast amounts being funneled into the Auckland rail network. I think the current figure out there is $2 or is it $3 billion from the public purse and counting. We wouldn't need nearly that amount, maybe just 1% or 2 or 3. The good thing is that the former rail bed is substantially intact. It's still there, where the double tracking used to go, and just a matter of putting the tracks back and an overhead electrical supply. Or at the very least, a long passing loop from Abbotsford to Burnside. It's true that passenger trains would need to share the railway with freight, but clever railway engineers can sort that out. And restoring old stations such as Wingatui and Mosgiel, and otherwise building new ones where they used to be. Opening up again the wonderful old historic ticket booths in the foyer of the old Dunedin railway station. Some of you may have attended the recent meeting at the Toitū Museum, the campaign to bring back rail across the country. There certainly does seem to be an interest and enthusiasm for rail. Experts gave argument that much of the cost of putting back passenger trains in numerous ways costs less than the crude dollar amount needed up front due to the numerous flow-on benefits. This is a job and a budgetary responsibility for Kiwi Rail, your taxes, our Kiwi Rail. And one other advantage, as it happens, the new hospital will be just over the road from the Central City Railway Station. So this will be so convenient for people in Mosgiel and along the way, by the railway line, to visit the hospital. Just a short stroll. Well, okay, there's Highway 1 Castle Street in the way, but perhaps we could have, as they do in Wellington, a pedestrian subway under the road. Roll on the railway. And the third issue of mine, assisted dying in the case of dementia. I expect many of you will know what Alzheimer's disease can do to a person. It's the most common cause for people in older age to become demented, to lose their mind, to lose their understanding, to lose the person that they used to be. It's a cruel disease and there's no treatment that can prevent it happening. It comes on very slowly, very gradually, but once it starts, it keeps on coming. Someone of my age, in their 80s, can end up not recognising family, not understanding the world around them, prone to wandering without knowing where they're going, often becoming cantankerous and difficult to live with, and usually ending up in care in a dementia facility, sitting all day drooling and mute in a chair, with loss of bowel and bladder control and having to go back into nappies. In other words, with a complete loss of human dignity. Alzheimer's is the most common, but there are other dementias. One especially cruel one is frontotemporal dementia, which leads a person to lose their awareness of the normal, appropriate ways to react socially, and they can use foul language without being aware to the enormous distress of their family before the disease advances and they become mute and hardly moving, and then, after some years, released by death. Not everyone thinks this way, but for many people, as they get older, one of their fears is that they might develop dementia, and knowing what it will be like, from having seen it in others, often a family member who succumbed to the disease. They would wish at all costs to avoid being that way if they possibly could. I expect you'll know that assisted dying is now legal and has been since late 2020. But this is only available for those who have less than 6 months to live and who can give their informed consent. About 300 people have taken advantage of assisted dying over the last 2 or 3 years, and these have mostly been those with advanced, incurable cancer and some with a nasty nerve condition called motor neuron disease. Alzheimer's doesn't make the cut. The disease can last for years, and by the time it's advanced, a person couldn't give informed consent. The dreadful process just keeps going on, ongoing deterioration, the brain getting hollowed out, the last vestiges of awareness of humanity disappearing until, finally, a natural death brings a blessed relief. The way around this is to allow people to write an advance directive, that is to say, a legal document, that a person could request that assisted dying could be given in the event that the person might, in the future, develop advanced Alzheimer's. This is what I would want for myself and for anyone of a similar mind. And so I would want to table a bill in Parliament to proceed to a conscience vote, to allow assisted dying for those who had signed an advance directive and who then went on to develop Alzheimer's or a similar dementia. Alternatively, the current bill comes up for a review this November, and a simpler solution might be to lobby the committee concerned to add in a proviso about an advance directive. If I had the votes of this electorate propelling me into Parliament, might be optimistic, that might prove a pretty effective push to convince the committee. Either way, we, or at least many people, would wish to have and should have that choice. So righto, those are the 3 main issues upon which I would wish to stand and to seek your vote for. As I mentioned, I'd keep an open mind, and if I had anything useful to offer on another matter, and especially if something of local importance, well then I would. Actually, one other point that has been concerning me, and I know many in Dunedin and Invercargill, is the schmozzle that's happened to the Polytechnic merger, and I might want to make some voices about that issue. But if I'm not knowledgeable or not reasonably well informed, then I'd seek advice from others. As I said, I'll stick to my knitting. This is the first time for me, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. And so, if there were a minor, or should I say major miracle, and I actually did get elected, how should I respond if something comes up in the House that I didn't feel qualified to have a good opinion on? Which way would I cast a vote? Here I'd be guided by where the party vote went in this electorate. Of course, you will have 2 votes under the current MEP system. One for an individual, like for me, and then the party vote. So whichever party won the vote here at Taieri, I'd follow their lead and support them. And so if you did want to vote Labour or National or ACT or New Zealand First or Greens or whoever, you still can by your party vote. In other words, I'd be informed by your wishes and I would act accordingly, and I wouldn't go out on a limb. So that's who I am and that's what I'm on about. As I've said, what you see is what you get. I'm a passionate Dunediner, wanting the best for his city, and dismayed by the way we've been let down by the major parties, especially in the matter of the new hospital. And we need to claim a part of the national suburban rail dollar, our bite of the pie, just a small bite, to bring back a carbon-neutral train service from here to the city. And those who want to avoid Alzheimer's should have that option. Well, I'm hoping to make a difference. Some of you may know James K. Baxter's line about tossing among the London staid, a poem like a hand grenade. Well, I'm tossing a polemic like a hand grenade. A hand grenade that I would hope might explode around these parts, will get our local politicians to stand up straighter for their own people and wake up everyone to the dismal deal that we've been getting from Wellington. So, thank you very much for listening to me. And if I do make a firm decision to stand, and that will depend, and if you will consider therefore voting for me in the election, of course I'd be very grateful, but you must do what you must do. I've made my case to you, and thank you for giving me a hearing, and I'll keep making my case until election time. This campaign of mine will cost a few bob out of my own pocket, although as much as possible I'm doing it on the cheap. If I've struck a chord with you, and if you felt inclined to toss $1 or $2 into the bucket at the door, which my grandson will be holding, I'd be enormously grateful, but only if you want to. And so now if anybody would like a question or to agree or disagree with me or to give me advice or to tell me what to do, well then that's what democracy is all about, and here I am. So thank you for listening to me, and any questions?